Today's video is going to focus on the consequences of some pretty cruel legislative efforts taking place in the US right now, specifically the consequences that said legislation will have on the EV marketplace. And while we do have plenty of viewers in the US, the majority of our viewers in fact, I also want to acknowledge that for many of you outside of the US, and perhaps some of you in it, hearing me talking about US politics again is going to be something of a bitter pill. In fact, I know it's going to be a bitter pill for many of you, so to try and keep today's video light and fluffy, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to put some video interstitials that I hope will help quell anxiety and stress. Like this. Isn't that better? Okay. So, it's the end of May, and back at the start of the year, we ran a video discussing how it was likely that the US federal tax credit program for EVs and renewable energy, plus a bunch of other things, were on the federal chopping block at the hands of President Trump and Doge. I and Kate warned in subsequent videos about some of the stuff which at the time was being carried out by the White House, taking the form of some pretty indiscriminate executive orders that regularly raised eyebrows over their legality. These included pauses in already committed funding for federal programs focused on building out EV charging infrastructure and establishing a better, cleaner, greener electrical grid. And as we warned, quite vocally at the time, the action seemed straight out of Project 2025, a hefty tome of far-right conservative policy guidance written by folks at the Heritage Foundation, a tome that the president claimed, and still claims, to have no connection to or knowledge about, but strangely, whose primary author now has a very important position within the cabinet. In response to some of the videos warning of the dangers that lay ahead, we had some pretty vocal sorts in the comments telling us how wrong we were and how we were suffering from TDS. That's Trump Derangement Syndrome. How we didn't know what we were talking about and we should not worry our pretty little heads and go back to the sink, and telling us that, among some nastier things I'm not going to regurgitate here, that we were completely overreacting and were damaging our channel and should keep politics out of EVs. I really, really, really wish that we were wrong. But told you so. They can go, told you so. EVs are now a direct target of the federal government, along with clean energy projects. And if the one big beautiful bill that's currently making its way through the Senate is passed into law, which it probably will in some form, EV tax incentives and green energy incentives will be going poof at the end of this year. So today, I'm going to explain a little about what's been going on, help you figure out the confirmed from the rumoured, and explain why there is still time for you to benefit from federal tax incentives before they vanish. I'll also help you navigate how to go about applying for them so you don't get caught out. Following court case after court case, the current White House administration is attempting to shore up some of its policy decisions by passing new legislation in Congress that helps make its aims a little more solidified than relying on the president issuing edicts via executive orders. The new legislation is currently in the form of what President Trump is calling the One Big Beautiful Bill, a 1,000-plus page piece of legislation presented as a budget bill, but packing in not only proposed budget cuts and tax breaks for the wealthy, but also significant changes to federal law covering everything from healthcare provisions to law enforcement and tax code. This piece of legislation includes provisions I'm not going to get into here, but will dramatically and disproportionately affect some of the US's most vulnerable parts of the population. It will bring into effect some state-sanctioned provisions that legal scholars argue will be unconstitutional, particularly due to their impact on marginalised communities. And since we focus on cleaner, greener, safer and smarter transportation and energy, It's also likely to end, among other things, the federal tax credit programs for home solar panels and electric vehicles, while also imposing a new annual registration tax on EVs. While the passage of bills can change quickly, at the time of filming, the bill has passed the House by one vote, but has yet to pass in the Senate. And we're learning this week from some representatives on Capitol Hill that they voted in favour of this 1,000-page bill without actually reading it.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
And given what we know about Senate Republicans' general attitudes towards EVs, their willingness to read large pieces of legislation, and the fact that they are in the majority, and this is a budget reconciliation bill which requires only a simple majority rather than a supermajority, I am almost certain that the bill will pass with the EV and energy-related legislative changes intact. So today, I'm going to explain what's happened thus far, what you need to know, and how you can still secure an EV or clean energy tax credit before the very likely end of them at the end of this year. But first, I need to give you some legal stuff, the difference between executive orders and actual bills signed into law. Executive orders are essentially decrees signed by the president, or in fact a state governor, that call on the power of their relevant office to enforce a change in how things are done. They are different from the usual bills that make their way through and are passed by both the House of Representatives and the Senate before being sent to the president's desk to be signed into law. Importantly, executive orders cannot be used to declare war on another country, they cannot appropriate or withhold funds, or create new taxes. And those are some of the reasons, by the way, that the president's current list of executive orders are being so frequently challenged in court. Of course, I should make it clear that I've just given you a very basic rundown, but hey, you all watch Schoolhouse Rock, right? Right?
While a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be alone.
Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but while the US Constitution does provide the President of the United States the ability to use executive orders to direct the operations of the federal government, specifically to use their discretion to determine how to enforce federal law and manage resources and staff of the executive branch, executive orders are meant to be backed by expressed or implied law from Congress, and also they need to comply with the Constitution. Now, prior to recent history, executive orders were treated more as a way to act quickly in the event of a sudden crisis, rather than be a replacement for the often slow and laborious process of passing bills through Congress. They were never meant to be used as a direct replacement for either the legislative branch, Congress, or the judicial branch, federal courts. It's also worth noting here that the current US president has signed a handful of bills into law since returning to office in January, but has signed 152 executive orders and counting thus far. A significant number of those executive orders have been challenged and found to be unconstitutional in court, and it's likely to take years before we see the full fallout from the cases still pending. This situation is further complicated because the president and his cabinet are strong proponents of a pretty controversial and edgy interpretation of federal law called the unitary executive theory. That's a theory, obviously, central to something called Project 2025. Perhaps you've heard of it, which basically suggests the president holds power over all other branches of government without the usual checks and balances that the three co-equal branches are supposed to enforce. Because of this, the White House has been largely ignoring, or at least trying to ignore, decisions from both federal and Supreme Courts. But here's where it gets more concerning and insidious. One of the get-out-of-jail provisions that's tucked into the aforementioned One Big Beautiful Bill actually tries to prevent federal courts from enforcing legal consequences against the government. Groups like the Campaign Legal Center have called this a serious threat to judicial oversight and democracy itself. So this bill isn't just about budgets or tax breaks, it also carries some very heavy implications for the balance of power in the United States. In a moment, what all of this means for EVs, but after that all, I think we need another cute break. That's better, isn't it? Okay, ready for the next section? On to the actual impact of the bill as it stands so far. Remember, it hasn't passed the Senate yet, and it's likely to take a while to do so, because some fiscally conservative Republicans are not happy with the bill as it stands. Not because of the social safety net cuts, or in fact, the massive tax breaks for the wealthy, but because it doesn't cut federal spending enough, nor does it address the growing national debt. Basically, it's not cruel enough. And because of that, it's probably safe to assume that EV and green energy tax cuts will be left in the bill. So let's look at what is included. Like most tax incentives, the EV purchase credits for both new and used EVs currently have a natural sunset date set for the end of 2032. This new bill would move that expiration up by 7 years to the end of this year for the majority of EVs on the marketplace, but it also adds a small 1-year extension for automakers who have yet to produce or sell 200,000 electric vehicles in the US. But it doesn't stop there. No, the bill ends all clean vehicle tax credits for commercial electric vehicles and cuts all funding for charging stations and alternative fueling infrastructure. And if passed, this would essentially eliminate federal support for clean energy programs designed to help Americans transition away from fossil fuels and towards a cleaner future. In the place of removing these tax credits, the bill does propose a new tax deduction for auto loan interest, but only for vehicles made in the US. And that might sound great on paper, but frankly, few vehicles are likely to qualify for this because of the restrictions on parts and sourcing, and the provision also faces likely legal challenges from the auto industry, who have a lot of money to throw at such things. Finally, the bill imposes a new electric vehicle registration tax, $250 per year per EV, or a $100 annual fee on hybrid vehicles. And that's on top of existing state registration fees. In some parts of the US, this could more than double the cost of registering an EV overnight, and your local state DMV will be tasked with collecting those fees on behalf of the federal government. And because why not? The bill also includes a provision to immediately resume oil and gas drilling leases across the US, with mandated lease sales at least 4 times a year for Wyoming, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Nevada, and Alaska, plus, quote, any other state in which there's land available for oil and gas leasing, end quote. I know you're going to need some fluffy animal time in a second, but bear with me. I didn't mean that pun. Alongside the above, we're also going to see the Home Efficient Home Improvement Credit and the New Energy Efficient Home Credit, the two main programs used by many homeowners and builders to make homes more energy efficient, install photovoltaic solar panels, and energy efficient heating systems, vanish. Like EV tax credits, they're due to get sunset at the end of this calendar year, moved up from 2032. If you want to read the full text of the bill yourself, feel free. I'll link to it below in its current form. But be warned, it's long and it's complicated and it's depressing. But if you're still with me, great. Have some more floof. And breathe. Okay, so we now know that EV tax incentives and greener home credits are likely to just disappear and will do at the end of this year. So how do you take advantage of everything before then? Because there's still 6+ months before the end of the year. First, if you are considering a major investment, like a new or a new-to-you EV, or a home improvement that would have previously attracted a tax credit, there is still time to take advantage, but be aware, there's bound to be a load of changes in the coming weeks and months, and a lot of disinformation too. So, if in doubt, talk to your friendly tax advisor before making a purchase decision. I would normally just suggest contacting the IRS, but based on recent reporting and the massive number of staff laid off at the hands of Doge, I suspect that you would just end up stuck in the same kind of hell on earth that many seniors are now experiencing just trying to reach someone at Social Security to change their postal address. I mean, As an example, at the start of this year, I switched Transport Evolve's payroll processor and ended up paying double payroll tax for 1 month. The old payroll provider couldn't help, and the new one wasn't allowed to help, so when I called the federal government, well, I went round and round and round in a phone tree with no luck. When I did finally get a human on the line, she either couldn't or refused to authenticate me, so the feds still have a sizable chunk of my company budget they've not given back yet. And frankly, I may not get it back. I've kind of written it off as a loss. Find a reputable tax specialist to confirm the current tax law and how it applies to your specific situation. And if you are working with a firm for solar panels, a heat pump, or anything else in the green energy bucket, make sure they actually understand the forms and how to fill them out correctly. I have heard many horror stories lately, and this stuff matters because one misfiled document, one signature in the wrong place, and the federal government may seize every opportunity to reject your claim. This is also true for EV purchases, but I'm going to expand on that in a moment. Unless you have already got a small fortune in a Cayman Island bank account, or your dad is very influential in the party, don't expect any help from anyone clawing back the money. Your only real option, and I really do mean this from the bottom of my slightly mechanised heart, is to ensure that your filings follow the new tax code to the letter. This applies to EV purchases and EV tax credits too. Double, even triple check with your own pet tax advisor before making any commitments, handing over any money, or signing on any dotted lines. I know. It is a little neurospicy of me to be so obsessed with doing things the correct and right way, but honestly, it is how I have survived in society this long. In fact, go one step further. Be like my rat biker friend Russ. Hi, Russ. He knows the law inside and out when it comes to his bike. So when someone tells him he's done something incorrectly on his bike, he can point to the exact section of the code that proves them wrong. And, as a side to the sides, rat bikers, who are people who ride rat bikes, not rats who ride bikes, they're usually a special breed, usually very brilliant and accomplished engineers who know exactly what is and isn't legal on their bike. Their bikes might look like they shouldn't be on the road. Maybe they've been in Mad Max too long, but trust me, the people who built and ride them have read the fine print. Their bikes are frankly often safer and more compliant than that overclocked electric scooter the teenager down the street is riding while desperately trying to prove to the cops it's legal for him to ride. Congratulations, we've made it to EVs and tax incentives. Obviously, based on the outgoing law from the previous administration, which cars are and aren't eligible for tax credits is still a little bit of a minefield, but there are some important things to bear in mind here. First, find a dealership that, as I previously noted, is familiar with the current outgoing federal filing system for new EV purchasers. They will need to file the paperwork, and you, yes you, need to confirm that they can and will file that paperwork expeditiously. Don't allow the dealer to give you bovine byproduct and tell you it's a choco pie. If in doubt, ask your local EV owners group for recommendations in your area. And of course, you should also be joining your local EV group, by the way, and figure out which dealers have a good reputation and which ones shouldn't be touched with a barge pole. This is true for both new and used EVs, and I should note here that you can only be eligible for the used EV tax credit if you buy your used EV from a licensed used car dealership who is willing and able to file on your behalf with the Empire for the point of sale rebate. So no, buying a clapped-out Nissan Leaf from a Jawa in Mos Espa who insists the dents are aerodynamic improvements and throws in a busted R2 unit for luck won't get you your tax rebate. Might it be charming? Maybe. Likely to get you in the wrong type of trouble? Let me put it this way, unless you are a Jedi, these are not the cars that you are looking for. Next, double check, not just with your dealership, also with a tax advisor, that your chosen vehicle is eligible for tax credits. While most incentives are set to sunset at the end of this year under the yet-to-be-signed bill, if it passes the Senate in its current form, something weird will happen next year. That means only automakers who have sold fewer than 200,000 EVs in the US will be able to offer tax incentives for one additional year after the end of this. So Tesla, Ford, GM and other high-volume manufacturers of EVs will be ineligible for tax credits after December 31st, but low-volume automakers may still let you have those tax credits for another year, or at least until they hit that 200,000 vehicle limit. Now, to get all of your filing done, you'll need to have all of the required information needed for your paperwork. You'll need the figures from your last year tax returns, and you'll need your tax identification details, because without them, your dealer will not be able to file the paperwork, and there be dragons ahead. Now, the leasing loophole currently remains open, which means that you can still get a tax credit through a lease on cars that wouldn't be eligible for the credit through purchase incentives. But again, that does all disappear at the end of this year. But having all of your important information ready to go at point of sale is another way to ensure that your dealership has very little excuse not to do your paperwork in a timely fashion. And since most places do point of sale rebates, they also have an incentive to get the money back. I should also emphasize here that you need to get everything in writing and signed by someone of authority at the dealership. Quotes, prices, a breakdown including the rebate. Make sure you have it all and you walk away with it. And you also need to get a copy of that tax rebate paperwork too, showing the date you applied for it and your signature. Make it hard for your dealership to make your life difficult down the road. Oh, and if you are a sole trader, as I am, know and be willing to explain the difference between gross income and adjusted income. Based on my experience last year trying to buy my F-150 Lightning, the first was used to qualify me for finance, but the second one was what I used to show that I was actually eligible for the tax credit, as it takes into account your outgoings associated with your business. Next up, and this is also super important, make sure that you read all of the paperwork you have been given to sign. One wrong name, one mistyped letter, and things are going to be a disarray sent down the road. And believe me, you do not want to have to deal with extra bureaucracy because the dealership misspelled your name. Ask me how I know. Fun story. Recently, as some of you may know, I claimed my Canadian citizenship. My mum's Canadian, so I've technically always been a Canadian by birth, but I didn't have my certificate of citizenship. And after last election, I decided it was time to obtain mine. So I did. But somehow, someone in the Canadian government misspelled one of my names on my certificate of citizenship, so I then had to go through the lengthy process of getting it changed for free before I can use my certificate to get my Canadian passport. In my case, it was their fault, not mine, and they covered it free of charge. But it is another reason why I always say double and triple check any paperwork relating to important things like the government. Finally, you should have a plan B. And I mean, not that plan B, obviously, because that's also being threatened by this new massive one big beautiful bill. I mean, plan B as an alternative plan for funding your new purchase. This might be considered a little overkill, but I would personally recommend you treat any rebates and purchase incentives as something you would very much prefer to receive, but absolutely do not need it in order to make your purchase figures work. We know for a fact that the current White House isn't super worried about playing by the rules, and a majority of judges seem to agree. So plan your purchases around the total money you can afford, either in financing or purchasing, rather than the total money you can afford factoring in any tax credits or discounts you might get back. That way, even if you discover down the road that you have less luck than a lower decks grunt from command who's been picked for an away mission on a planet you've never heard of, at least the only thing you have to worry about is the sentient oil slick heading your way that's just munched on the head of security. I miss Tasha. Nerd jokes aside though, if you are buying an EV or improving your home's energy saving measures this year, planning ahead, doing your research and making sure you can afford the thing even if the feds turn around and say, no, is probably the best way through this. Whatever this is. And congrats, you made it through the video. Have a puppy. Thanks for joining us today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room, on our Patreon page down below, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They're part of the massive community of supporters who make this channel possible, helping us through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and helping us to remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. We've got options available across a wide range of different price points, starting from $1.50 US a month. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Roshilu, Lynn, Mogren, Yalafli, Abigail, Jason Hellman, Mike, Rastas, Jay, Jim Boyer, Trebor, Steffel HB, Calvin Klein, Albedardo Conessa, John Snyder, Scott Matheson, Mia Hartman, Philip Paul, Randolph Lee, Simon Cotell, Stephen Meadows, BGB Thauben, Kristen Ramison, James Holyroad, Robin Holston, MK Duffer, S.A. Gimpson, Chip Chandler, Jeff Harrop, Nye Mister, Robert Bettencourt, Jason Broder, Brian Newton, and Mark. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame, and you can even gift membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll also find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at for the time being, address listed below. You'll also find links to our swag store, and if you are someone who has to shop on Amazon, please consider using our affiliate link so we get the commission, not Jeff Bezos. So we can continue to focus on making our content even better and reduce burnout. We're a little freer with our release days this year, but plan on dropping new content every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday on the main channel, plus something on Sunday over on Transport Evolved Take 2. If you want more, the algorithm that hates us thinks you should be watching this video, but this one is one we think you should check out. Be awesome, be kind, be intentional, and don't forget to resist. Keep evolving!